What's good, everyone? Coach Damien here from the Shift Method. Hope y'all are having a great day. This is going to be episode number 43 of the Shift Method podcast, coming out on Monday, May 22nd. Just some updates as always. Always remember, if you want to subscribe to the newsletter, that's where I'm going to do a bunch of major updates for y'all in terms of content, what's going on in my life, anything else that's going on. We got it coming out the first Monday of every month. And so the June newsletter is going to be coming out very soon. So make sure you subscribe to that. If you want more information, you can do that by going to my website, theshiftmethod.org. It'll auto-populate for you to sign in, or you can scroll down to the bottom of the first page and you just put in your email, your name, and you will automatically be signed up to be part of that newsletter. On that note, I'm going to be doing a Memorial Weekend sale. So be on the lookout for that. Again, if you're in the newsletter, you'll see it. But just want to make sure everyone's aware that some of my services in terms of the online program design, as well as some of my store items, are going to be on sale for a couple of days. So if you want to cut some merch, if you want to get a program for yourself or for a friend or a loved one, you're welcome to get so at a little bit of a discounted rate for yourself. Just kind of a little holiday sale for y'all that we got going on. I did my DECA race. I'm recording this on Sunday. So yesterday I did my DECA race. For those who don't know, DECA is kind of a version of a Spartan race, kind of like that obstacle course race where it's a 1 mile run, but it's broken up into a 1/10 of a mile sprint followed by an obstacle. And you repeat that 10 sprints and 10 obstacles. And I got a video coming out about that. That'll be the following Monday. I think it's the 29th or 30th, one of those days. It's going to come out on Memorial Day. So that's going to be cool. Hopefully y'all will enjoy that video. It was a tough race, man. I PR'd in the time because I did the event in my training a couple of times, but man, it was hard. It was hot outside. It's basically summertime here in South Florida. So it was challenging, but all in all, a really, really good race. Otherwise, y'all know about services, right? If you want to work with me, you can click any of those take action buttons on my website on theshiftmethod.org, or just head into my DMs on Instagram at _shift_method. Would love to work with y'all in person in South Florida, or of course, we can work virtually online. So that way we can go ahead and help you reach your goals the best way that makes sense for you. Again, this is episode number 43 of the Shift Method podcast. And today is going to be fitness and wellness Q&A number 3. So y'all have submitted a couple of questions for me. I made sure that I picked ones that aren't reoccurring. So that way we can do some fresh ones. That way I'm not doing the same ones every single time. So I got 4 really good questions here that I've kind of cultivated. I'm going to go over all of them. As always, if you guys enjoy these videos, please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And of course, whenever I put up a little bit of a Q&A post on Instagram, make sure you ask your question. That way you can hopefully get yours answered. I do these about once a month. So hopefully y'all will be able to put down what you want, and I can hopefully do a video about it and give you some answers. But let's go ahead and jump into question number 1. The first one is just a very kind of vague question. It's thoughts on BCAAs. So for those who don't know, BCAA stands for branch chain amino acids. The best way and simplest way I can describe these is think about they're kind of like the building blocks of muscle, and generally derived from protein, right? So you think here, protein helps with building muscle mass. It's the building blocks of muscle, and it is true. And part of that is that BCAAs, amino acids, are broken down in your body and then used to help build up muscle through muscle protein synthesis. You have 20 amino acids that we know of, and then 9 of them are what's considered essential amino acids. Essential meaning that your body cannot make it on its own. You have to derive it from your diet. And these can come in a variety of forms. And the most common way people think is that it derives from animal product, but you can also get it in things like dairy, soy, certain vegetables, and other food sources like nuts. But there are 9 that are essential that you do have to get from your diet. And then on top of that, 3 of those are what's called branch chain amino acids. These are kind of the ones that are looked at more stringently in terms of they seem to have a larger contribution to building muscle mass and muscle protein synthesis. So you'll see a lot of supplements will say, hey, we have this BCAA, whether it's a protein supplement like a whey protein, or if it's just a supplement that has BCAAs in by itself to help you with muscle protein synthesis. And this certainly can be helpful if you're someone who maybe struggles to get enough protein in your diet. General rule of thumb, and I'll mention this again in one of the later questions, but if you're someone who's working to build muscle mass outside of a weight loss context, anywhere around the 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight is a safe rule of thumb to where you'll be successful. 1 gram per pound is a true statement for the most part. But if you're really struggling and your protein is quite on the lower end, like let's say you're someone who weighs, 150 pounds, so you would want to eat roughly 150 grams of protein per day, and you're struggling to make it to like 80 or 90, you might benefit from supplementing with some BCAAs if it makes sense for your diet. If you're really just like, man, it's hard for me to get a lot of protein in, and I just am really struggling to find ways despite trying, it might be some benefit for you to consider using some BCAAs. However, I would always recommend trying to just simply increase the protein content or the volume in your diet. And that kind of cleans up most things, because if your diet is high in protein and from these sources like we talked about, like from meat, dairy, soy, nuts, etc., chances are you're probably going to get the recommended amount in your diet by itself. Again, those 3 BCAAs being leucine, isoleucine, and valine. A lot of research with leucine, how that can be really helpful in your diet in terms of muscle protein synthesis. And you can, of course, get a whey protein that if you like that in your diet to help get your protein content in, it might contain leucine. And so you kind of get that benefit already. But if you have a high protein diet, chances are you're probably already getting enough BCAAs or amino acids, period, and you should be okay. But again, if you're someone who's struggling with protein content or, the quality of your protein, where we know that animal product generally tends to be a little bit more high quality than a vegan-based protein or a vegetable-based protein. For example, pea protein can be great. Personally, I actually like pea protein. I think it tastes pretty good. But in terms of its bioavailability, where, how much your body can utilize it, it doesn't seem to be as good as if you did it with an animal product. Again, not to knock it, getting protein in is better than not getting it in. But in terms of bioavailability and being able to get the most bang for your buck out of protein, sometimes some of the vegan-based options may not be as beneficial as the traditional ones. So kind of to put a bow on this one, if you're getting enough protein intake and you're getting it from a variety of sources like meats, vegetables, nuts, dairy, etc., you're probably pretty good. However, there are some considerations to make if you are someone who struggles to get high protein diet in, or maybe all of your diet comes from exclusively plants, and you might be struggling to get some of those meat-based products, then maybe you can consider using a BCAA supplement, but it's not the end of the world. So that's kind of the TLDR on the BCAA conversation. Hope y'all find that helpful with your protein intake and what to do in that regard. Question number 2, how do I know what my ideal weight should be? This is a great question. I talk about this all the time with my students I work with, as well as with my clients who ask this question. So it's tricky, right? I think my friend and colleague Hannah Thompson said it best. And when it comes to, knowing your weight and like clients asking like, oh, what weight should I be at? Or how do I know I'm at my quote unquote ideal weight? It's you'll know when you know situation. You can use certain things like, BMI. I know people shit on BMI, and that's fine. But it can give you maybe a very, very rough estimate that at this height, this might be a range if someone really needs a concrete number. I don't typically do that exactly because it doesn't really take into account, again, purely body composition as well as this person's genetics and natural history. What I'll do sometimes with people is I will ask them, in the last maybe 6 months to a couple of years, so that way it's as relevant as possible, when you were in a healthy dietary pattern and activity history pattern, what weight were you able to get at and where did you feel comfortable? Because if I have a history and I'm not talking about something where, someone's 30 and they're like back in high school, that's not relevant. Your body changes so much from the time that you're 18 to when you're 30. So I wouldn't use that as a guide. But if maybe a year ago, they're like, well, when I was serious about exercise and eating properly with my nutrition, I got down to X weight. I felt really good. It was sustainable. I still was able to maintain like my social habits with my friends and family, and I enjoyed everything about myself. And I was at this weight or this body composition. That could be a good indicator of that's where we maybe want to aim for as kind of like a starting point, right? But if we don't really have that information, and the individual doesn't have any relevant history, you are kind of shooting in the dark, for lack of a better term. So what you can do is maybe set a short-term goal. It depends on how much weight the person might have to lose, which again can also be tricky. But maybe you set a short-term goal like, hey, let's just see where the scale goes, right? We're going to focus on your resistance training. We're going to focus on getting your protein high. We want to have high intake on your proteins. That way we can help build muscle mass or retain, and also work with satiety. So you're not, constantly having cravings and you feel like you're derailing your progress. Let's make sure you do your conditioning because it's good for your heart and your lungs. And then let's make sure our nutrition is proper for your goals and see where the scale goes. When the client gets to a point where, there's trade-offs where it's like, hey, how important are aesthetic and quality of life goals to you versus your lifestyle? And you find that nice balance of like, okay, the scale has gone down. I feel good. I look the way I want. And I feel like if I try and push any harder, it's going to be detrimental and not sustainable. That's kind of the cutoff, in my opinion, where it's like, let's say you start out with a client, they start at 200 pounds. They have excess adiposity. They have a high waist circumference. They have maybe lab markers that indicate that cholesterol, blood pressure, et cetera, are high. Okay, you're a good candidate for weight loss. They get down to 175, let's say. So they've lost 25 pounds, maybe over the span of a year or so of working with you. And they feel great. They love the way they look. They love their energy. All their, weight training is going well. They're having PRs, all that great stuff. But then they try and push for 170 and they're realizing like, yeah, coach, like to adjust my diet anymore. Could I do it? Yes. But I can tell it's not going to last very long. And I'm going to be in a very weird spot with like making it sustainable for myself long term. That's probably your ideal weight right there, at least at that stage of your life. And so you might hear sometimes this term called set weight theory or set point theory. There's some truth to it in the sense of like, your body kind of has that comfortable range for itself, depending on your environment, depending on your genetics, and depending on where you are in your stage of life, right? Again, 18-year-old weight of range, whether let's say at 18, you weighed between like 150 and 160, is different than 45-year-old range where you might be more comfortable at 180 to 190, right? So understanding, that difference of that your body might feel comfortable at a different weight at a different point in your life, and you have to explore and find that. So you can use the general rule of thumb. Again, it's not 100% accurate, but it's a safe rule of thumb. It's the 1 to 2 pounds of weight loss per week by the CDC. With individuals dealing with higher levels of obesity, it may happen faster, and that is okay as long as they have a healthy pattern of eating, meaning they're not binging, they're not doing any kind of unhealthy behaviors in that regard, excessive exercise to kind of punish themselves or whatever it may be. So it may happen a little bit faster. And then you're going to gradually track body composition, waist circumference, the weight on the scale. And then when they get to that point where it kind of stagnates and you've checked everything, programming looks good, their eating is done well, and they're maintaining their social relationships and other things that are important to them in their life, and they've kind of reached this equilibrium, that is going to be your ideal weight for you at that point in time. So that's the longest way I can say it's a non-answer in a sense. But you can discuss with your client like, hey, we can set maybe a small goal of 5 to 10 pounds if you feel as though through their body composition analysis that they have weight to lose. And then we can go from there and figure out like, hey, this is a good way to think about it. Another thing you can do, right, we know for men and women respectively, and again, there's genetic components to this, so little asterisks there. We know that generally for women, we want to be under 32% body fat, and men on average less than 25. Those are kind of the cutoffs for having obesity. And so on average, we can say like, hey, I know your weight, and let's say I calculate your body weight, right? So let's say, someone who's 100 pounds, and if you measure their body fat and they're 25% body fat, that lets us know that they have 25 pounds of body fat on a 100-pound frame. And we know that if we get under that 25% for a male, that we can be healthier in terms of our blood markers, in terms of our overall health, et cetera. So then we can say, okay, well, we know that we have, maybe a couple pounds to lose to get under that 25%, right? So you could also use that math as kind of a good indicator. And again, genetically, people might just naturally have more body fat. They might be a little bit over. There are individuals who do find themselves having clinically diagnosed with obesity, but maybe their blood markers and everything are healthy. That will happen in some individuals. But you can also use that as a way to gauge like, okay, this person is this much body fat. We want to get to here. So based on that, how many pounds could they theoretically lose to kind of get them under that threshold? That is another way that you could look at it as well. But ultimately, it's going to be a constant conversation of, how are you feeling? How are you balancing life and these other factors? And so, like this is an ideal weight/body composition for you at this point in your life. Question number 3. So now we're going back to a little conversation about protein. Thoughts on protein consumption being detrimental to kidney health? This is a good question. You'll either hear about protein or creatine. And I think in one of my other videos, we talked about creatine and kidney health. So it's good to talk about protein. So again, individuals working to build muscle mass, the rough recommendation is 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. So a good rule of thumb is a pound per gram, or excuse me, a gram per pound of body weight. So if you're weigh 200 pounds and you're otherwise healthy and you're trying to gain some muscle mass, you can roughly estimate to go for about 200 grams of protein per day. The thought of protein being damaging to the kidneys, to make it short, as you consume more protein or more food in general, but protein specifically, the thought was that it puts more stress on the kidneys because it has to work harder to filter out the protein and excrete anything that's in excess. And it's true, your kidneys do work harder to excrete anything that's in excess. Kind of similar to the creatine story, but a little bit of nuance there. But just because the body is working harder to do something, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. We often hear times that, it's kind of like the inflammation conversation where, any kind of inflammation or excess stress is going to be bad. But stress is just an increased production or increased work of the body. So yeah, your body's working harder to filter out the protein, but that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that your kidneys are being damaged because they're having to work a little harder to get the excess protein out of your body. So an otherwise healthy individual, there really isn't any concerns that we see with increasing your protein intake compared to the general population. High protein intake can be very healthy and very health promoting for increasing muscle mass. For individuals dealing with trying to lose weight, it can help with satiety. It can help maintain your muscle mass. For older adults, it can help, retain the muscle mass or build it up a little bit better to help with, the unfortunate side effects that can come with age, with, loss of muscle mass, loss of bone mass, and things like that. For those that are dealing with kidney disease, this is something you're going to have to talk to your doctor about. You need to find out, do you have certain restrictions on certain dietary patterns, whether that's sodium concerns, whether that's protein concerns. That is ultimately up to your doctor to determine. But for healthy individuals, having a high protein diet can be very health promoting and otherwise isn't going to cause any harm to your kidneys. So I would not worry about that one. And last but not least, kind of a more philosophical question, which I always love those. When did you first hit a wall in your professional career and how did you move past it? So this is a really good question. And it's funny because we're coming up on, I'd say that I guess at this point, would that be about 3-year mark or 4-year mark rather, because this was 2019. I was in grad school and for those who don't know, I went to Purdue University for grad school. I got a graduate assistantship at their rec center up there. I oversaw the fitness department and I was going for my master's in health and kinesiology. I knew I wanted to work in campus rec and I'm in campus rec currently, and I love it. But I definitely was, doing some soul searching and realizing, that I definitely know I'm not going to be in this into my 60s. I'm not going to be in campus rec for 40 years or so. And it was also compounded by the fact that, I'm in a place I've been in for about a year at that point. My supervisor had taken another job. So I was kind of, manning the operation all by myself, which was difficult, supervising about 100 people and first time being out of the state, big culture shock. Didn't have too many friends at the time. And later I developed friendships, which is awesome. And I didn't have really a supervisor that gave me a lot of guidance. So it was a tough time, man. And it's freezing cold. And so I'm dealing with that, not a lot of sunshine. It was a very difficult time in my life where I kept having this man, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And thankfully I found a mentor, Coach Lucas Woody, who, I've had him on the podcast and he's someone I talk to quite frequently who always gives me good advice. As I was thinking about what to do and where to go from here, I had to do some soul searching. And the biggest thing he always talks about is, find your why. And, it was around, it was either on Memorial Day or that weekend. So it's again, coming up on that anniversary of this thought. And I sat down and said, okay, Damien, you're someone who likes to map stuff out. You're someone who likes to take time and think about the why and figure out, what is your motive? What is your goal? And so I sat there and for probably, a lot of hours, I'd say 5 or 6 hours, I was just going back and forth, writing things down, mapping out my life. And I kept coming back to the same exact answer. That answer was, obviously, you're going to work in campus rec. You love it. You're going to be there for a decent amount of time, but you are going to build your own business. And that's important to you. And it's not just because it's cool and because it's trendy and it's fashionable. All right. Obviously, making a business is a fun endeavor. It's cool to be your own boss in a lot of ways. I don't want to take away from that. But ultimately, I know that I can serve a higher purpose, and that I realized there were gaps in our industry that I felt and I know that I can fill. And then so by realizing that, I set out to myself saying, I'm going to create my own business. I'm going to be my own boss. I'm going to do something that provides value that no one else can do but me. And so I need to do this. And so from that, working with my mentor, eventually getting a supervisor and making good friendships, the second half of my GA position was absolutely phenomenal. And out of that, I was able to go ahead and create the shift method. And so I outlined my goal, I actualized it, and now I'm actually going out and doing the damn thing by having my own business and doing my trainings and doing my educational seminars, and the rest is history from there. So it was a bit of a roadblock because of some compounding things that were going on in life at the time, but I moved past it by mapping out everything that I wanted to accomplish and made sure I kept coming back to that same answer, and then ultimately trusting the process that this is what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. And now looking back 4 years, 3 years later, I've realized I made the right decision and I couldn't be happier about it. So yeah, if you're ever having a roadblock, man, always take a step back. And that's okay to have roadblocks. You're going to run into those. You're going to question what you're doing. Take time to sit back and always go back to your like why. Like what are you trying to do? Who are you trying to serve, and why you try to serve them? That will help clear up a lot of questions or confusions that you maybe have dealing with your career, dealing with your personal life. Taking that time to really, be introspective and reflect on what's going on will definitely be helpful. And it's something that I also do for a lot of my young coaches and students that I work with, sitting down and trying to map out their future as best as possible to provide some clarity. So definitely could be something that's helpful along your journey. But that is our final question for today. I hope you all found that beneficial. And again, if you like this, please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And anytime I throw up any Q&A questions or Q&A opportunities on Instagram, be sure to put your question. I would love to answer and give some insight onto what you write. And again, making sure that you guys, check me out every Monday through Friday. We got content coming out on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And the podcast comes out every other Monday. And then we have YouTube videos on the other Monday that we don't post. So we got something new for y'all every single Monday. Again, you can head to theshiftmethod.org. Check out the different services, check out the store. And of course, you can always follow me at _shift_method on my social media platforms. Otherwise, everyone, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful Memorial weekend coming up here soon. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Later.